My son gave his father-in-law a brand new fishing boat for his birthday, $23,000, custom rigged, with a trailer and a 2-year service plan. I know because my son posted the whole thing on Facebook. 18 photos. His father-in-law standing on the dock, arms wide open, grinning like he'd won the lottery. I found out about it the same morning I opened the birthday card my son had slipped under my door before he left. Inside was a gas station gift card. $15. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. The coffee went cold. The card sat face up in front of me. That generic blue design with balloons on it. The kind they keep in a rack near the register. He hadn't even signed it, just "Happy Birthday, Dad" in his own handwriting and his name. Leonard, like I might not know who it was from. I didn't cry. I'm 63 years old and I stopped expecting things from Leonard a long time ago. But something about that morning, the Facebook photos, the balloon card, the cold coffee, something settled into my chest like a stone that's been there ever since. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what happened. I spent 31 years with the county highway department. Started as a crew laborer the summer after high school. Worked my way up to district supervisor by the time I was 40. I am not a man who talks much about what he sacrifices. Where I grew up, in a small town outside Dayton, Ohio, you didn't make a production of working hard. You just did it. My father worked the line at a parts plant for 38 years and never once complained in front of me. I learned from that. When Leonard's mother, my wife Joanne, passed away from ovarian cancer 12 years ago, Leonard was 27. He had just started at a financial planning firm in Columbus. He was doing well. We weren't close the way some fathers and sons are close, but I thought we were okay. I thought we understood each other. After Joanne died, I sold the house in Dayton and moved to a smaller place in Marysville. Leonard helped me move boxes for one weekend and then drove back to Columbus. And that was mostly how things went from there on out. A phone call on holidays. A visit once or twice a year. He married a woman named Tricia 4 years after his mother passed. Her family had money. Her father, a man named Stan, owned a regional chain of auto dealerships and had that particular kind of ease that comes from never having worried about a bill in his life. I tried to like Tricia. She was polished and smart, and she clearly adored Leonard, which mattered to me. But there was something about the way she looked at my house, at my truck, at the way I talked. Something that told me I wasn't quite the type of family she'd had in mind when she married up. I told myself it didn't matter. Lots of people marry into different circumstances. I told myself that. For 3 years after they got married, Leonard and Tricia came to Marysville for Christmas. Then it was every other Christmas. Then it was just Thanksgiving. And even that got shorter each year, arriving Sunday afternoon, leaving Monday morning, as if spending time with me was an obligation to be minimized. Meanwhile, from what I could see on Facebook, Stan and his wife Beverly had my son and daughter-in-law at their lake house in Michigan every 4th of July, at their condo in Scottsdale every February, at the dealership Christmas party in December. Leonard posted those photos too. He smiled differently in them. Looser. Like he was home, I noticed. I didn't say anything. The birthday card was the 15th of September, 2 years ago. That same afternoon I was sitting on my porch when my phone buzzed with a text from Leonard. It said, "Hey Dad, just wanted to make sure you got the card. Also, I know it's your birthday, but I'm going to need a favor. Can I call you tonight?" I read that text 3 times. He called at 8. He needed me to co-sign a home equity loan. He and Tricia had found a property in Dublin, a suburb of Columbus. Nice area, good schools for when they eventually had kids, and they wanted to renovate. The numbers he gave me was serious. The renovation alone was budgeted at $140,000. He was applying for $110,000 against equity in his current home. The bank had come back asking for a cosigner because his debt-to-income ratio was too high. He'd recently financed a new truck and, I later found out, the fishing boat for Stan. "You want me to co-sign?" I said. "It's just a formality, Dad. My income is solid. This is just how banks work sometimes. Leonard, if something went wrong, my name is on that loan. That means my credit, my savings, everything I have left is exposed. Nothing's going to go wrong. I asked him to send me the paperwork. He said he would. It took him 11 days to send it, and when I read through it, I found that the loan was for $110,000 at a variable rate that could climb considerably over 5 years. Leonard's current debt load, counting his mortgage, his truck, a personal loan I hadn't known about, and 3 credit cards, was already close to 70% of his gross income. I called my own bank. I called a friend of mine who'd spent 20 years in mortgage lending before he retired. His name is Albert, and he was blunt with me the way old friends are. He said, "Don't sign that, Gordon. If he hits one bad quarter at that firm and misses 2 payments, they come after you." I sat with that for a week. I prayed on it. I thought about Joanne and what she would have said. She always saw Leonard more clearly than I did, and she loved him without flinching from what she saw, which I think is a harder kind of love than the kind that just goes blind. I called Leonard and told him I couldn't do it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Fine," and got off the phone. He didn't call me again for 4 months. That winter was a long one. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. I had my neighbor's dog to walk in the mornings. I had a small woodworking project I'd started in the garage. I had Albert and some of the guys from my old crew who'd get together at the diner on Tuesday mornings. But evenings were quiet in a way that had weight to it. The following spring, I had a routine checkup and my doctor found something on my lung. Not cancer. It turned out to be a granuloma, scar tissue from an old infection, benign. But for 6 weeks between the initial scan and the follow-up biopsy results, I didn't know that. I was 62 years old, living alone, and for 6 weeks I thought I might be dying. I told Leonard. He called once, a brief call, maybe 8 minutes. He said he was sure everything would be fine and that he'd been really busy at work. He asked me to keep him posted. I kept him posted by text message because I didn't want to call and feel what I'd felt at the end of that 8-minute call, which was the particular loneliness of understanding that you are not, in the way that matters most, someone your child is able to show up for. My daughter-in-law, Tricia, did not call at all. The results came back clear in late April. I told Leonard by text. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji and said, "Great news, Dad. Knew it'd be fine." I put my phone down and went out to the garage and stood there for a while with my hands in my pockets, looking at the half-finished cabinet I'd been building. I thought, this is who my son is, not a villain, not a bad person, exactly, just a man who chose, repeatedly and without much visible conflict, to give his best to people other than me. I made peace with it, or I thought I did. Then came his father-in-law's birthday, and the $23,000 boat, and my birthday, and the $15 gas card, and everything I thought I'd made peace with turned out to just be waiting. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I think it matters that you understand I did not go looking for what I found. In late October of that same year, Leonard and Tricia came to Marysville for a weekend, just an overnight. They were passing through on the way back from Tricia's cousin's wedding in Cincinnati. They stayed in the spare room. Saturday morning I made eggs and we sat at the table, and it was fine. Pleasant even. Leonard showed me photos from the wedding on his phone. Tricia told me about a restaurant in Columbus she thought I'd like. It was the kind of visit where you're on your best behavior because the time is short enough that nothing real has to be said. They left Sunday after lunch. Leonard hugged me in the driveway, a quick, solid hug, and I thought, maybe this is enough. Maybe this is just what we are to each other now, and maybe that's okay. An hour after they left, I went into the spare room to strip the bed. On the nightstand, Leonard had left a manila folder. Not hidden, just left there, the way you leave something you meant to take and forgot. His name was on a label on the front tab. I almost put it aside for him to pick up next time. I don't know exactly what made me open it instead. Maybe I've asked myself that question enough times that I've stopped needing to answer it. Inside were printed emails, internal correspondence from his firm. And what I read, sitting on the edge of that bed in the spare room that still smelled faintly of Tricia's perfume, made my stomach go cold. Leonard worked in the retirement planning division of his firm. His job was to manage investment portfolios for working and middle-class clients, the kind of people who'd spent 30 years putting money away and trusted someone with credentials and a nice office to help them not lose it. What I read in that folder told me that Leonard, along with at least one colleague, had been systematically moving client funds into high-fee proprietary products, annuities, and structured funds that generated significant commissions for the advisors while quietly eroding the client's returns over time. It wasn't a dramatic theft. It was the slow, legal-seeming kind of theft that's harder to see and harder to prosecute. The emails discussed specific clients by account number, and in some of them Leonard was explicit about the rationale. These clients don't read their statements carefully, and by the time they notice the surrender period will have passed. I sat there until the room got dark. I have a neighbor, a retired school teacher named Agnes, who's been widowed for 6 years. I know for a fact she uses a financial advisor in Columbus. I thought about Agnes. I thought about the people I'd worked alongside at the highway department for 3 decades. Men and women who'd worked hard their whole lives and put money away for retirement the way you're supposed to. I thought about my own father, who would have been exactly the kind of client those emails were describing. I put the folder back on the nightstand. I went to the kitchen and sat for a long time. Then I went back to the spare room, took the folder, and made copies at the drugstore in town before I could change my mind. I want to tell you that I acted fast. I didn't. I spent 2 weeks going back and forth. I called Albert, but I didn't tell him exactly what I'd found. I asked him hypothetically what a person's options were if they discovered evidence of financial misconduct at an investment firm. He told me that FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, has a reporting mechanism. He told me the SEC has a whistleblower program. He said if I was asking hypothetically, I should probably talk to a lawyer first. I called a securities attorney in Columbus. His name was Paul, and I spent $60 an hour for a 90-minute consultation that was worth every cent. He reviewed the copies I brought. He was careful in his language, but the weight of what he said was clear. What I was describing, if accurately documented, constituted a serious breach of fiduciary duty and likely violated several provisions of securities law. He said I had standing to file a report. He said I should expect the process to be slow and the outcome uncertain, but that documented evidence from internal communications was significant. He also asked me whether I understood the personal implications of reporting a family member. I told him I understood. I drove home from Columbus on a Tuesday afternoon in early December. The fields along Route 36 flat and gray, and I thought about Leonard as a boy. I thought about the summer I taught him to drive the old riding mower. I thought about the night he called me in tears at 2 a.m. because a girl had broken his heart in college, and I drove up to Oxford to take him to a diner, and we talked until 5 a.m, and I drove back to Dayton alone with the sunrise in my windshield, thinking that there was nothing in the world more worth the drive. I thought about all of it, and then I thought about the clients in that folder, the account numbers, the surrender periods. I filed the report with FINRA in January. I also, because I am my father's son and do not do things halfway, sent an anonymous certified letter to Leonard's firm's compliance department with a copy of 3 of the most explicit emails. I did not sign it. I did not have to. I didn't tell Leonard. I didn't tell anyone except Paul, the attorney, and, eventually, Albert. Albert was quiet on the phone for a long time after I told him. Then he said, "Gordon, that took guts." I told him it didn't feel like guts. It felt like the only thing I could do and still look at myself in the mirror. 6 weeks later, Leonard called me. It was a Sunday evening in late February. I was watching a college basketball game and eating a bowl of chili. He didn't say hello. He said, "Dad, I need to tell you something and I need you to just listen." He talked for 20 minutes. His firm had launched an internal investigation. He and his colleague had been placed on administrative leave. He didn't know how the compliance department had been tipped off. He was scared. He said the word scared twice, which is not something Leonard does. He told me his attorney had already advised him not to discuss details, but he wanted me to know before I heard it from somewhere else. He said he hadn't done anything wrong, that it was a misunderstanding about the products they'd been recommending. that the commission structures were disclosed. I listened. I did not tell him what I knew. When he finished, I said, "Leonard, I think you need to take this seriously and do exactly what your attorney tells you." He said, "Yeah." He sounded young. He sounded like the boy who'd called me at 2 in the morning from a dorm payphone, except that this time I hadn't been the one he'd called first, and I noticed that, and I sat with it. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked. He said, "No, I'll figure it out. He will have to. That's the truth of it. Some things a father cannot fix, and some things a father should not fix, and this is both. I haven't told him that I filed the report. I don't know if I ever will. My attorney says I am not legally obligated to disclose it, and my own conscience, after a lot of quiet examination, agrees. I didn't do it to hurt Leonard. I did it because there were real people. People like Agnes, like the guys from my old crew, like my father, whose retirements were being quietly taken from them. Leonard made a choice. The choice had consequences. That is a sequence of events that belongs entirely to him. What I keep coming back to isn't the investigation or the filing or any of that. What I keep coming back to was a Saturday morning 2 months ago. I was at the diner on my regular Tuesday. Wait, it was actually a Saturday, I remember, because Albert had brought his grandson, and I ran into my neighbor Agnes. She mentioned that she'd gotten a letter from her financial advisor's firm saying her account was being transitioned to a new advisor following an internal review. She seemed mildly annoyed by the inconvenience of it. She said, "You know how these things are. Lots of paperwork for nothing." I said, "Yep." She went back to her booth, and I went back to my coffee, and Albert caught my eye across the table. He knew. He didn't say anything, which is one of the things I value most about a 40-year friendship. Leonard called last week. He's been allowed to return to work in a limited capacity while the investigation continues. He doesn't know the outcome yet. We talked for 19 minutes, which is longer than we've talked in years. He asked about my health. He asked about the woodworking project. He asked a little carefully if I needed anything. I told him I was fine. He said, "Dad, I know I haven't always been great about staying in touch. I want to do better." I didn't say, "I know about the boat. I know about the card." I didn't say any of that, because that's not what this is about. This is not about a $15 gift card or a $23,000 fishing boat. Those things hurt, but they're not the wound. The wound is older and quieter than that. I said, "I'd like that, Leonard." And I meant it. That's the part that I think is hardest to explain to people who haven't been here. That you can mean it completely, that you can want your son back, want the diner at 5 in the morning and the sunrise on Route 36, want all of it, and still have done what I did. Those two things live in me at the same time, and I have stopped trying to resolve them. My father worked 38 years in that plant and never complained. But I don't think silence is always wisdom. Sometimes it's just habit. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to protect them from what they've become. I still have the copies of that folder in a locked box in my bedroom closet. I don't know why I keep them. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as evidence of a moment when I was 63 years old, sitting alone in a spare room in the dark, and I chose something harder than looking the other way. The birthday card is still in my junk drawer. I don't know why I kept that either. Some things you just hold on to, not because they make you feel good, because they're true. I've thought a lot about the word deserve since all of this happened. Leonard would probably say he didn't deserve what came down on him. Some people who hear this story will agree with him. They'll say a father shouldn't report his own son. That family is family, that I could have found another way. I understand that position. I held it myself for 2 weeks, sitting at my kitchen table with those copies in a folder of my own, going back and forth until I thought I'd wear a groove in the floor. But here's what I kept coming back to. The people in that folder didn't deserve it either. They were just Agnes. They were just the guys from my old crew. They were just ordinary working people who did everything right, saved carefully, trusted the wrong person, and were quietly being taken from while the statements kept arriving, and everything looked fine on the surface. That kind of wrong doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give you a chance to fight back. It just slowly costs you the retirement you spent 30 years building. And by the time you notice, the surrender period has passed and there's nothing left to do. What Leonard did, and I've had to be honest with myself about calling it what it was, wasn't a mistake. It wasn't poor judgment on a single bad day. It was a choice, made repeatedly, documented in his own words, rationalized in emails he sent from his work computer. That takes a particular kind of thinking, a slow erosion of something in a person that I believe starts long before it shows up in writing. I don't know exactly when it started in Leonard. I've asked myself whether I missed something when he was young, whether there was a moment I could have reached him differently. I don't have a clean answer to that. What I do know is that integrity, real integrity, not the kind you perform when someone's watching, is built in small moments, long before it's tested in large ones. It's built in how you treat the person who can do nothing for you. It's built in the gap between what you say you value and what you actually do when the choice costs you something. Leonard learned early, somewhere along the way, that charm and surface competence were enough, that you could manage how people perceived you and the rest would take care of itself. I'm not without fault in that education. The harder lesson, the one I've been sitting with since February, is that clear-eyed thinking saved people that Leonard's choices were hurting. Not anger, not revenge, just a willingness to look at what was actually in front of me, think it through carefully with people I trusted, and act on what I found. Paul the attorney. Albert. 40 years of a friendship where the other person tells you the truth. That clarity, that willingness to think hard about hard things, even when the answer is painful, that matters more than most people give it credit for. And then there's just the plain fact of not quitting on yourself. I'm 63. I live alone in Marysville. I had 6 weeks where I thought something might be seriously wrong with my lungs. I have a son who left a $15 gift card under my door. None of that broke me, and I want to say that plainly because I think there's someone watching this who's been made to feel smaller than they are by someone they loved. You are not smaller. You are exactly who you were before they made you feel that way. The work of being a decent person in a complicated world doesn't stop because someone you raised decided to take a different road. I still have coffee with Albert on Tuesday mornings. I still walk my neighbor's dog. The cabinet in the garage is finished now. Maple, dovetail joints, better than anything I've built before. Leonard called last Sunday. We talked for a while. It was real, or close to it. That's enough for now. Some things rebuild slowly, and that's okay.